This is Bruce Whitfield's Business Week. Bank better with Business Week and Capitec, the business bank for everyone. Business without the boring bits.
Capitec is an authorized FSB 4669.
Each week we share just what you need to know to help you understand and better navigate the complex, confusing and uncertain world around us. And on the podcast this week, markets giving a thumbs up to a sensible medium-term budget policy statement. I'll share some of what I've learned at the Singapore FinTech Festival this week. Plus, the business of crime, not the usual stuff you hear about, but how fighting it pays. Let's kick off with the brutal biz quiz on this edition of Bruce Whitfield's Business Week. Your question: what costs 4 times its value to make, has been in production since 1793, and will no longer be made in the United States? That's the brutal biz quiz question this week. That answer coming up in a bit. Helena Bossaman, the business editor at News 24, is with us. Spent a lot of hours this week locked up with the medium-term budget policy statement and really getting her teeth into it. And none of the drama of the budget of earlier this year. No nasty 2% VAT surprises. In fact, a very sensible medium-term budget policy statement, Helena.
Yes, as my mom always say, good news weakens me. And I think for South Africans, it's very hard to comprehend that we are actually back on the brink. And when you see it in black on white in those medium-term budget documents, things are actually looking really good for South Africa at the moment, especially compared with the rest of the world. You know, the key number for me in the budget yesterday was the fact that government's borrowing costs fell from 8.3% in March to 7.6% in October. So South African government bonds are back in demand. Foreign investors want to invest in South Africa, in part because of the inflation target, you know, and the conservative approach from our authorities. They know that yields will stay strong. We committed, we took the hard hits. But it's actually remarkable if you look at the global economies. In the UK, borrowing costs are at 27-year highs, record levels in Japan. So we're really an outlier at the moment.
And this wonderful change in sentiment. I saw some comments from the businessman and the key figure in the private sector work that's going on behind the scenes with government, Adi Enthoven. He gave a speech in Stellenbosch recently saying that there are these strong signs that South Africa is turning, not has turned necessarily, but is turning the corner. And our language and our approach to our country, at least in the early stages, is looking positive.
Yes, and you know, it didn't come without pain. Part of the reason that we have a positive budget and making progress in tackling government debt is because of the burden on taxpayers. It was very interesting. You talk about drama earlier. Remember the hot mic issue with our finance minister, Godonwana, who said some nasty things about the SARS commissioner, Edward Kieswetter, on a hot mic earlier this year. And then after that was basically forced to give Kieswetter 7.5 billion rand in extra funding to target more tax, you know. And it was interesting in this budget. Currently, Treasury is still planning to extract about 20 billion rand from personal taxpayers next year. But they're saying if SARS can step up debt collections, that may be avoided. So pressure is back on Kieswetter.
And look, you've got to have a little bit of tension between all these arms of state. There was huge tension earlier on as the Reserve Bank Governor Lesitsha Kganyago announced his 3% inflation target, and the ANC had a cadenza and Treasury was on the defensive with it. But everybody's buying in to better fiscal management and to being quite aggressive when it comes to managing inflation, which is the sort of weapon of mass destruction of the value of our money. So, you know, good that they're taking control. It's not going to lead, though, to this miraculous leap to investment grade, because we're quite a few steps below investment grade with most of the big ratings agencies. But even they are softening their stance towards South Africa now.
Yes, S&P is due to make an announcement on Friday. There's some hope that they may upgrade us, our rating, which would be the first upgrade in 25 years. But we're still far off from the investment grade rating. But I mean, in in the global context, we're definitely looking better.
The guy made famous as the Peace Call Me guy, Nkosana Makate, won his battle finally with Vodacom. Yet he's not out of the woods yet when it comes to fights, because in the early days of picking this fight with Vodacom, he got help from all kinds of quarters. Now, people are sort of saying, Nkosana, please call me because you owe me money.
There's this company in the British Virgin Islands. They're saying that he agreed to pay them 40% of the awards, which we estimate to be above 700 million rand, the total award. But Makate's fighting back. He's saying he's not going to pay the money. The agreement was terminated more than a decade ago. The whole fight will be seen in the courts next week. So it's an interesting twist in the whole saga.
I go back in the depths of my memory, which sometimes let me down, but I recall meeting one of those people who came from offshore with a suit on in the early days of this battle, looking to leverage their position. They were advising him in this fight. They've had to wait an awfully long time to get their payday. It's going to be fascinating to see how our courts decide. Sometimes you've got to be careful what you wish for. You think you've won, and then everybody else says, oh, hold on a second. I want a piece of this too, please. And that battle plays out next week, does it?
Yes, that's right. Some urgent applications.
Fascinating. Helena Wasserman, the business editor at News 24. What is the one thing this week that is most important? And that is South Africa very firmly 3 steps back from the brink. The massive family-owned private security company Fidelity is planning a listing on the JSE in 2026. Private security, of course, has been a massive growth industry in South Africa amidst the failure of the state to make you feel secure and, of course, the issue of rising crime. Chief Executive of Fidelity Services Group is Val Bartman, who's with us on Bruce Whitfield's Business Week. And for so many companies in South Africa, for so many residential estates, Val, you are the last line of defense. And it's unfortunate for the country, but this is an industry that has had the wind in its sails for a long time and appears still to have a bright future ahead of it.
No, definitely. And I think, we're in a fortunate position with national footprint and all the different divisions that we have, that we can provide that extra security to all our customers and the public in South Africa.
And I say unfortunately, but I mean, unfortunately, it remains a growth industry. South Africa's big structural inequalities, and despite a good medium-term budget policy statement this week, which is very good at a fiscal level, crime remains the national scourge.
Yes, definitely. I think that crime is definitely, we've seen it, it's moved around. And yes, I think that the public is trusting the private security industry to step in and to support the SAP wherever we can.
Government for a long time has been trying to clip your wings as an industry, looking to remove firearms from private security guards. Does that remain a risk, or is it something that's sort of off the agenda now?
Well, I think the biggest problem is I think some of the intentions is quite good that they want to achieve. So we need to manage in the way that we handle firearms, etc. But without consulting with the industry and the major players in the industry, it's quite difficult. So, yes, they've tried, and between ourselves and all the other organizations, we've stopped that now. It was supposed to be addressed in Parliament, but due to the minister that's been suspended, that has come and gone.
For now, but you talk about yourselves as being in support of the police, and maybe that's an important part of this dynamic. Police, unfortunately, are inadequately trained and staffed and able to manage the issues of crime that South Africa faces independently of the private security industry, which I think employs probably 4 times the number of people that the police employ. And so perhaps that is the collaborative way we need to manage the insecurities of South Africa.
Well, currently the registered active security officers are more than 600,000 in the industry. So that's huge. If you look at where we are, we form a very small part. We employ 70,000 staff members in our business. So the percentage is actually quite small. And for us, the growth opportunity is there. But yes, because our powers are limited, we still need the police to do certain functions. So we work with them and support them. And where they don't have those expertise, we are filling all those gaps. And that also happened now in our launch of our fire response services into all the different communities on a national basis.
Yeah, and again, because so many towns and municipalities just don't have the fire services they do. Has your family ever brought on private equity? I'm curious as to the reason why you would take a family business and list it on the JSE, which brings so much more paperwork, which brings so much more process, which brings so much more admin and oversight of the company. Christo Wiese once said to me one of his biggest regrets was being forced to take PEP onto the JSE when he hit a cash crunch in 1985. He wished he'd never had to do that. Why are you doing it?
Well, Corvest has been a partner of our business for many, many years. They've invested for a very long time. And I think our business is now at a stage where the size and the growth and the growth opportunities there, and also to create some liquidity for some of our shareholders, I think that's the right option and about the only option for us to continue with.
Famously, you were a Springbok rugby player in your day. I laughed when I sort of was looking through the notes and I saw John Smith had turned up as the CEO of SSG Holdings, which is one of several acquisitions you made in recent years. Are there any more rugby stars in the industry? And I wonder why you guys find it so attractive. You like the hurly-burly of everyday life.
Yeah, I know John, and Craig Burden is also in our business. He's also the Beast Tunde was also involved. He's no longer involved in our business, but yes, as you know, we've acquired SSG. We brought that into our fold, and I think, it's a very good foundation. And the way that we're looking at our business and where we want to go, I think definitely the JSE is the right option. Corporate governance, I think we've been part of the structure that we are. I think our corporate governance in our business is very good. We manage that quite well, and we have been awarded with a few awards from the JSE on the unlisted reporting of our business. So there's a lot of compliance that we've already done. We wanted to list in 2022, but then the markets weren't good at all. And I think this is now the economy and everything and the markets are looking great. So maybe it's the right time for us to go into this venture.
Do we see it happen in the first quarter?
I think it would probably in the first quarter, yes. There are two options for us, and definitely our year end will be the end of February. So we will consolidate the SSG number into our number and also would be able to give a proper indication exactly with audited financials where we are and remove any doubt if there is.
South Africa's biggest privately owned security company listing on the JSE in 2026, Chief Executive Val Bartman. Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, I've been at the Singapore FinTech Festival this week, and it's absolutely astonishing. What's most interesting is a big portion of the gathering obsessing over dollar-linked stable coins, which are helping people in countries with less stable currency environments to find a store of value out of sight of national governments, which no doubt will cause headaches for states at some point. But also this rapid adoption of AI and technology in our everyday lives. And in the corridors of power of fintech in Singapore, I caught up with technologist Dieter Botha, and I asked him what the world was coming to.
I used to come many, many years ago to CyberCon, which was just payments. There was no such thing as fintech, etc., but that's just absolutely exploded now. So CyberCon, payments, etc., now cloud computing, blockchain, you just name it. And the latest thing, the AI wave, what that's going to be doing to banking and financial services is enormous. So as one walks around the stands here, it's just absolutely oozing AI and blockchain at the moment are the big ones.
Now, you've just used words that 99% of people listening to us don't understand. In the real world, as we go about our daily banking, how has that changed? Because I don't know if we remember back 10 years ago, in the world before apps, and 10 years before that, the world before the internet banking and queues in banks on a Saturday morning. What is changing in the banking experience of real people in the real world?
Yeah, so firstly, the big thing, as you're 100% correct, saying it's all app-based at the moment. But that's today, as we know, and it's been like that for, 10 years, give or take. When one looks just a little bit over the horizon, the amount of AI that's coming down, we're all starting to engage and play with ChatGPT, all those kind of things. If you really take a step back, that sort of gives you a hint to where it's all going. Fairly soon, you'll actually be asking a GPT to do something for you, to make a payment for you. Now, you on your banking app would have authorized it previously and saying, this GPT, whenever it wants to pay something, let it pay up to 2,000 Rand and just do it. And doesn't even let you know. So that's where it's going. So, your primary interface could even move to inside ChatGPT, but it's wired in the background without you knowing it into your bank for you. But you're still in control of how much it can spend.
Talk to me about the hype cycle of AI. We have seen NVIDIA, for example, go to $5 trillion valuation. There is so much money being pumped into these companies that most of them didn't exist 20 years ago. Now they're the biggest and most influential companies on earth. I believe that AI is here to stay and will fundamentally shift the future. Has there been an overdone hype cycle in terms of our short-term expectations on AI and the reality of what it will yet deliver?
Because I actually, oddly enough, don't think so. I think this is real, and I think it's here. Sure, there might be a small correction soon with the valuations of some of these entities, but this stuff is real, and it is going so hard and so fast with so much money being thrown into it all around. And when the consumers are seeing it on the social media channels, and us as organizations, we simply can't adopt this stuff fast enough. That's how fast it's moving. But no, this is absolutely here to stay, and it's going to fundamentally change how all of us work every day in all our business and daily lives.
You were talking in a presentation earlier this week all about the fact that right now you need about 500 people to run a fully digital bank of 10 million customers. And you say it won't be long until a bank of 10 million customers can be run by 50 people. Now that is frightening. What are the dynamics that lead to that outcome?
You're quite right. It is frightening. But if one takes a step back, a traditional bank a few years ago, 30,000 people, 40,000 people to bank 10 million customers. As you're saying, today we know digital banks, 500 people, 10 million customers. We're planning that we know that in the next couple of years, 50 people can bank 10 million. So that is quite scary. But in that process, we believe that you'll have a better product and a better customer experience through those 50 people because they are surrounded by a swarm of AI agents. So that's the interesting stuff. And there are benefits for the consumer in that whole thing. Obviously, cheaper cost to serve. The flip side of it, which is a bit darker, is, what happens to the people? And where do people get jobs in the future? So that's going to be a bit more challenging, I think, as we go down this path.
I've got young kids. Your kids are slightly more advanced in years than mine, but are going into the workplace. How do you see that future? Because I look at it and half of me is incredibly excited, and the other three quarters, you saw what I did there, the other three quarters absolutely petrified for the sort of careers that are yet to be dreamed of.
You're spot on. I wish I knew is a simple answer. I've got two boys. The one has just finished matric now, and the other one is in second year university. But truthfully, I actually don't know what to tell them. But what I have thought quite deeply about is I do believe that jobs that require your hands, so electricians, plumbers, paramedics, I think those jobs are going to be a lot safer for a lot longer. But when it comes to your traditional office jobs, those kind of jobs, I think are in threat. That will be automated by AI in the next couple of years.
How are the rest of us going to pay the electricians and the plumbers if we don't have jobs ourselves? And it's a slightly fatalistic view of it. And the Luddites in the start of the Industrial Revolution were petrified that machines were going to do everything. And they do. And we're better off than we ever were before. Is the world of 2050 a more productive, prosperous place for more people than it is today?
You know what? I'm going to be optimistic and say absolutely yes. Man, we've got an incredible knack of solving problems. We really have. Sure, we create a lot of problems on the way, but we solve problems. If you just take back the last 200-300 years, our quality of life has just been on the trajectory up. So, with that in mind, I think the way we know the world today, absolutely, it's going to change fundamentally. But I think that it's going to be a better place in the future. But it's going exponential now. And when things go exponential from a technology, it's very hard to predict. But optimistically, it's going to be better.
Dieter Botha is a technologist at the Singapore FinTech Festival.
Bruce Whitfield's Business Week, the podcast that respects your time and your intelligence. In the Brutal Biz Quiz this week, I asked you earlier, what costs 4 times its value to make, has been in production since 1793 and is no longer being made in the United States? The answer is the penny. The Philadelphia Mint this week striking its last batch of 1-cent coins after more than 230 years in production. The Treasury Department in the United States estimating about 300 billion of the coins will remain in circulation. And they say that far exceeds the amount that's actually needed for commerce. Naturally, of course, some retailers have already started rounding up prices to the nearest 5 and 10 cents. But yeah, the end of the American penny, the one with Abraham Lincoln on the back. Now, a conspiracy theorist may say that's why it's stopping. But seriously, 1-cent coins just have no value anywhere anymore.
That's the sound of your business growing. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, turn your passion into profit with Capitec Business Banking. Save up to 50% on fees. Get fast credit approvals, personalized support, and Forex for your business. Open your business banking account on our app. Bank on better with Capitec, the business bank for everyone. Capitec is an authorized FSP, 4669. T's and C's apply.
We talk a lot about companies and shares. Well, I'm going to get Warren Ingram at Galileo Capital to go back to the basics of what shares actually are. In the meantime, let's talk about shares with Jean-Pierre Testard, the founder and chief executive at Protea Capital Management. Raubex, the road builders, had a horrible year, but I suppose the medium-term budget policy statement, which Helene and I have chatted about briefly, will be quite promising for them because, like so many other companies, they had to go elsewhere to find some money and got burned in Australia. Maybe there's business for them in a more hopeful South Africa into the future.
Yes, hopefully so. So in the budget, we are firmly on the path towards fiscal sustainability again, and that could mean more money available for infrastructure, which would benefit Raubex. And in this result that they released in the past week, SA did okay. It was slightly down, mostly because of mining. But to your point, Australia, they took a big bath, have a 200 million loss in Australia. So it just goes to show that, they started the business just building roads. Then they went into infrastructure and some mining. And those types of contracts are quite different. It's higher risk than just putting down some bitumen on a nice road. So they took a loss, and hopefully they can stem that in Australia and still benefit from South Africa. So the future is bright for Raubex, just a little bit of a wobble in the past 6 months in these results.
Vodacom has got the noise of the Makate thing out of the way now, but it's quite weird to think of it as like an elder statesman of the South African corporate sector. It's like the granddaddy of the cell phone industry. And a bit like all established companies, ultimately they will face some quite fierce competition. And there's a lot of competition on the sidelines of this telecom sector coming through quite nicely. And that's putting pressure on the likes of Vodacom.
Yes, especially in South Africa. So if you look at the results that they released also in the past week, South Africa profits were actually down 11%. Speaking to that pressure, we know that Cell C is also imminently going to list, and we also see some pressure from Cell C. So the telecoms industry is a mature industry, especially in South Africa. But the one country where Vodacom is still benefiting from decent growth in telecoms expenditure by people is Egypt. So the Egypt result were up 66% within Vodacom Group's results. And Egypt has grown to be almost as much as important in Vodacom's life as South Africa. South Africa accounts for about 42% of Vodacom's profits, and Egypt does 38%. So the Vodacom we know today is not just a South African business. It is quite a big African business with Egypt and then Safaricom and some other small markets that also had exposure to. So strong growth at the headline level, Bruce. But if you dig into the details, especially in South Africa, and the Egypt performance will probably not be repeated. So growth will definitely decrease from this point going forward.
1970s, the American slang for making money was making bread. I was looking at Premier Foods results, and, well, they're making bread from making bread. A lot of dough, in fact, is what they're making. I'll stop there. But a quick comment on Premier Foods results.
Yes, so very strong results. They're also busy with a corporate action, buying out Rhodes Foods Group. So that'll bring more than just bread and dough and wheat into their portfolio. But this result is the historical Premier performance. So they benefited from selling a lot more blue ribbon breads, as well as more snowflake flour and Iwiza mini meal. So those are the three main products that they sell, and the Rhodes Foods Group acquisition will give them some diversification, but they've done very well selling their historic products And that has benefited the likes of Brait as well, which has got a stake in Premier. So it's good to see that there's a good recovery in Brait driven by Premier. And Premier is also going to be the second biggest food producer after the takeover of Rhodes Food, just behind Tiger Brands. So Premier has really grown now into a major player in our local FMCG sector.
Have you ever gone and put your stuff in a storage unit between houses or, whatever the case might be? Have you ever stored stuff in a storage unit?
I have. My parents have. I think most people that move at some point in time need some storage, or when people retire, that was the case with my parents. They've got too much stuff and they don't want to let go of all the photo albums and the things that they don't actually need. So they need to find some storage. And to your point, Bruce, storage.
Such a great business, isn't it? Because we put stuff in these places, and because we want to hold on to it, we can keep it there for years and forget about it, but keep paying the subs. And for those companies, it's brilliant.
Yes, the average term of a storage unit being rented by someone is 27 months in South Africa. And in the UK, they also own Storage King. There it's 33 months. So that extends a little bit every year. They've got a very strong trend of growing this average lease period. So as people get more stuff and they don't want to let go of it, it benefits storage. And we see that with this result. They also listed 10 years ago, Bruce. So there's a nice slide in their results that shows that they actually outperformed the all share on a total return basis over the past decade. And very few property companies can say that. So their focus on storage in South Africa and the UK, it's almost 50-50 in their portfolio. The exposure to these two countries has benefited them. A single-digit growth in distribution per share, up almost 5%. Also single-digit growth in the net asset value per share. So the business is chugging along nicely as people have more and more stuff that they need to store every year.
What a nice summary of some of the big stories from the week that has been. Jean-Pierre Verster, thank you, the founder and chief executive at Protea Capital Management. What is a share? Why should you have a share in any business? We make the assumption, of course, always that everyone understands what it is to own shares, but not everybody does. Warren Ingram, who's a certified financial planner, whose day job it is to explain this to people, which is why we have him here. What is a share? Why should we own it?
Maybe to start with why we own it or why we should own it, it gives us the opportunity when we buy shares to participate in growth that great managers of great businesses will be getting from their companies over long periods of time. So it's about taking a little bit of money and becoming a small shareholder in a business where you believe that business is going to do well over a long period of time. The key with shares is that they tend to move in massive roller coaster rides. So we will be talking about shares today and feel around the dinner table that we're heroes because our shares that we've put in a little while ago at 100 are now worth 300 and we are masters of the universe. And then the next, it won't be a dinner party, but the next time we're sitting around in the fast food joint because we can't afford a dinner party and our shares are now worth 50, we'll be bemoaning the fact that nobody ever makes money from the stock market.
So when we are looking at shares, and there are a billion ways of valuing shares, and there are many millions of people employed around the world to look at each and every single company individually and to figure out whether or not it's worth investing in, I would go, and I don't know about you, Warren, but I would go, but the first thing I would do, and this is kind of a long-term project, I would go and read Warren Buffett biography, The Snowball. It feels like a slightly weird way to go about how to invest in shares, but before I bought a single share, I would read that book.
There is another great book called One Up on Wall Street by Peter Lynch. And I think the combination of the two would give you a very good idea of how to think about shares as a principle and then how one of the all-time great mutual fund managers actually chose shares and both when to buy and when to sell. And understanding that share investing, there are many different ways to do it, but investing a bit of time to read those books and maybe a couple more would either make you a lot of money over the next few decades or cost you a lot of money if you don't do the work. So invest the time, read the books, and then thank us later.
I would go for Snowball first, forgive me, simply because it's a story about a very successful investor. It's written by a third party about his thinking and his process. And if you don't have the patience to sit down and read the Snowball, I don't think you should be investing in shares at all, Warren. Controversial, but go.
No, I think that's absolutely right. There are very few of us that have the time and inclination to actually do the homework to choose individual shares and to then monitor them and do enough reading to get an understanding of the dynamics of that company's. Remember, you're not buying a piece of paper or you're not buying a ticker on a screen. You're buying a share in a business that operates in a particular economy with enormous dynamics that move that business around. You have to be ready to do the homework constantly to understand that. If you're not, go and buy a mutual fund, go and buy an exchange-traded fund, and listen to everyone else talk about it when they're buying shares and making or losing money. They won't talk about the losses. They'll just talk about the profits.
Certified financial planner, Warren Ingram at Galileo Capital. Your thought for the week this week, can you know when somebody's got an MBA? They tell you. How do you know when somebody's been in Singapore? They keep on banging on about it. Well, I mentioned I have been on the island state of Singapore this week, about 50 kilometers wide from west to east and 25 kilometers north to south. One of the world's busiest seaports, a hub of astonishing commercial activity. And a friend of mine was in a very busy coffee shop this week and asked his neighbor, whom he didn't know from anybody else, say, you might keep in my seat for me. And he was told, just leave your phone there. Nobody will take your place. Don't worry about it. He got back to his seat. The seat was still open. And his phone was exactly where he left it. Astonishing discipline, of course. Well, this week's thought of the week comes from Lee Kuan Yew, the founder of modern Singapore. And amongst the many, 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 many smart things that he said is this one. A nation is great not by its size alone. It is the will, the cohesion, the stamina, the discipline of its people, and the quality of their leaders that matters. Someone was telling me earlier this week about how their taxi driver was complaining about the government here, and we had such a laugh about that. How little this guy knows, who's possibly never left Singapore, about what happens in the outside world when countries allow their leaders to degenerate. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Lee Kuan Yew, the father of modern-day Singapore. Well, Bruce Whitfield's Business Week on News 24. Thank you so much for listening. Bank better with Business Week and Capitec, the business bank for everyone. For now, bye-bye.
Capitec is an authorized FSP 4669.